Good morning. I am Cesar Hernandez, the new kid on the block. I lead the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program, or much easier on the tongue, CMO at CALSTART, a program you're likely to hear more about later today. But for now, I'm your host, leading you through the speakers we have in store for you. I'm looking forward to getting into these discussions and celebrating the great opportunities to change transportation for good here in California and what we need to focus on this year. I'd like to thank our generous gold level sponsor, Edison International. Edison and its utility, Southern California Edison, are great partners for us at CalStart. And what a better way to kick things off than with a little bit of positive energy from Southern California Edison. Thank you, Edison International, for your ongoing support, and special thanks to Katie Sloan, Vice President of Customer Programs and Services at Southern California Edison, who serves as CalStart's board chair. But up first, we're going to do a deep dive into commercial vehicle infrastructure with a specific focus on public charging options. We are very pleased to have Jeff St. John, Editor-in-Chief of Canary Media, moderating this panel. He's joined by California Energy Commissioner Patty Monahan, Watt EV CEO and co-founder Salim Youssef Sadeh, and Stella Ursua, Programs and Partnerships Manager for Grid Alternatives. Please welcome the panel for Build It Up, supporting all fleets with publicly available infrastructure.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff St. John, Director of News and Special Projects at Canary Media. Thank you to CalStart for inviting me to moderate this panel on the challenge of building a publicly available charging network for medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles. I'm here with three esteemed panelists with unique insights on this challenge: California Energy Commissioner Patty Monahan, Salim Youssef Zadeh, and Stella Ursua. Thanks for joining us today. And we'd love to get into this discussion as quickly as we can, but I figured I should provide a little bit of context. California has set very ambitious electric vehicle goals and zero carbon emissions transportation goals. 5 million zero emissions vehicles on the road by 2030, 250,000 EV charging stations by 2025. It has also set some of the most aggressive heavy duty vehicle emissions targets in the country, including a mandate for all city buses to be electric by 2029 and an advanced clean trucks rule that increases the share of trucks sold in the state that must be zero emissions through 2035 on the way to the state's zero carbon by 2045 targets. Governor Gavin Newsom's budget proposal unveiled last month ups the ante on transportation decarbonization, calling for $10 billion in spending over the next 6 years. That includes nearly $1 billion for short-haul trucks and transit buses, $1.5 billion for electric school buses, $1.1 billion for truck, bus, and heavy-duty vehicle charging and fueling infrastructure, and $400 million to enable port electrification. And all these vehicles need to charge up. And while fleets can do some of that charging at home base, some of it must take place on the road. And we're here to talk about how California can design policy and incentivize private sector investment to ensure that that charging infrastructure is deployed quickly, efficiently, and equitably. So let's start with you, Commissioner Monahan, if you will. How can California accomplish these goals? How is the Energy Commission working with other state agencies, with utilities, with private sector stakeholders and community stakeholders to make this happen? And what are the primary challenges we face, and what are the opportunities to overcome them?
Well, thanks, Jeff. And I want to start just by thanking CalStart. I want to say that I have been very impressed with CalStart over the many years that I've interfaced with them. When I worked at the Union of Concerned Scientists 15 years ago to my current job, and CalStart has played just a really critical role, I think, in supporting especially medium and heavy duty fleets as they clean up their emissions and now zero out their emissions. So the Energy Commission's role when it comes to zero emission vehicles is to build out the infrastructure for refueling and to do the analysis around what the refueling needs are. And we rely on CARB's data. And excuse me, I'm having like an allergy reaction to, we need some rain in California. So I may lose my voice or make it a little squeaky. So I apologize for that. But we work really closely with the Air Resources Board. They're our partner agency. They focus on the vehicle side and the regulatory side. We focus on the infrastructure side, and we partner very closely together to make sure that we are coordinated on this. In terms of funding, we have several funding pots. The one that has been our sort of base funding pot is the Clean Transportation Program. That's about $100 million per year that we get. And we have increasingly been focusing on zero emission vehicle refueling infrastructure as a priority investment. There's also research and development funding. And then last year we got a big infusion from the general fund. And as I'll talk about in a few minutes, we're hoping for another big infusion based on the governor's proposed budget. So we know infrastructure is a major barrier. I'm going to start first on the battery electric side. I think there's, right now, battery electric technologies are sweeping the globe, and we're able to capitalize on that with falling prices. There's not price parity yet on the vehicle side, but it's getting there. And it's really only a matter of time. Global investments are flowing. We conducted an analysis of what the charger needs will be by 2030 and found that we're going to need 160,000 chargers for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And we found also that EV charging has the potential to increase total daily electricity consumption by 12 to 21% in 2030. That's for both light and medium heavy duty. So that's a big load. That's compared to the current statewide electricity load. And of that total, battery electric, medium and heavy duty trucks account for about 5 to 6% of the new load. That is both a challenge and an opportunity. So on the opportunity side, that's a big flexible load. Like if we right and we pair charging with solar plus storage, you get, for the driver, lower fuel costs, for the grid, a cleaner, more resilient grid. And for the people that otherwise are suffering from diesel pollution, you get cleaner air. So that's really the win that we're seeking. We want to build out a resilient refueling system. What we're finding is, that this is, of course, more complicated than just going to a diesel station, getting the pump and just getting your fuel. This takes like a spreadsheet, and you may have to hire an outside consultant to help you figure out what to do if you're a fleet manager trying to electrify your fleet. These vehicles also take time to charge, and they're heavy. So those are the challenges and the opportunities on the electric side. When it comes to hydrogen refueling, we think that there is also an important role hydrogen could play in the medium and heavy duty space. This is especially for long haul trucks or vehicles that may, just cannot accommodate the slower refuel time, the recharge time of battery electric vehicles. We've been expanding our investments in this space, especially when it comes to transit fleets that are interested in this. The transit agencies that have long routes can sometimes prefer hydrogen as an alternative. We've been, 2 years ago, when I started at the Energy Commission, we expanded our public hydrogen station investments to include medium and heavy duty. And right now we have sufficient funding to reach the state goal of having 200 stations open. And of those 200 hydrogen stations, 13 will be able to accommodate medium and heavy duty vehicles in addition to light duty vehicles. I think one of the disadvantage of hydrogen is that right now, most of it comes from fossil fuels and it's expensive, and we don't have a ubiquitous refueling infrastructure. So our theory of change is that as we invest more, especially in green hydrogen, that prices will fall and we'll be able to scale up. But this is really, we need to make sure that there's a global ecosystem of investments that help support what we're doing here in California.
Excellent.
And the governor's proposed budget would really give us a lot more money to invest in infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles. The proposal would give the Energy Commission about $2 billion over the next 4 years to continue to deploy infrastructure for light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. And of that proposed funding, about $1 billion of it would be used just for powering heavy duty vehicles and equipment. So that's a big opportunity that we're hoping everybody here can support, and really look forward to a conversation about how the governor's proposed budget will help us expand ZEV refueling options in the medium and heavy duty space. So the last thing I want to say is that we want to, make sure that as we expand infrastructure, that zero emission vehicles are good citizens of the grid. I mean, for us at the Energy Commission, that's really an important piece of our work, is to, we're connecting the transport and the energy sector in this intimate way that it has never been connected before. And whether it's producing hydrogen from renewable energy, or making sure that as we build out charging infrastructure, it's paired with solar plus storage. These are ways that we can make sure that both our transportation system and our electricity system decarbonize together.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's an extensive list of opportunities. And speaking of which, Salim, your company, Watt EV, is involved in solving some of these problems. You're building a massive solar battery powered truck charging hub outside Bakersfield. And that's to support a electric truck as a service business plan meant to enable shippers and truckers to achieve cost parity with fossil fuel trucks on the newer EV models for middle mile freight hauling. How does your model work? How does it help solve for some of the issues that Commissioner Monahan just brought up?
Sure. So thank you, Jeff, for the question. Thank you, CALSTART, for hosting this event. It's great to be here. I'm Salim, I'm the CEO of Watt EV, and we're a new startup company that's been around for about 2 years that's really looking to accelerate the transition to electric heavy-duty truck. Based off all the mandates and some of the points that Commissioner Monahan brought up, you can see that it's really not a matter of if, but when the transition to electric heavy-duty trucking will happen. And in order to get there, there has to be private companies like ours that are really taking that risk to deploy capital to build out the infrastructure needed to support these vehicles. So one of the efforts that we're working on is to really build out charging infrastructure, some like the ones that we have in Bakersfield, which is a 115-acre property that will about 100 acres will be able to install solar as well as battery storage, which solves two things. One, on the utility side of things, there's a lot of power that's needed to charge electric vehicles. And by deploying solar and battery storage, you can bring down the cost of the utility as well as the burden on the grids to get to that next step. On the other side of things, solar allows us to bring down the cost of energy significantly, which effectively reduces that end cost to the end user, which would be the driver. So we're doing a lot of these different types of charging networks, both in Bakersfield as well as in the other locations that we have. Now, when we were building out the infrastructure, we realized that it wasn't enough to just build the infrastructure and expect the demand to pick up naturally. That's when we really started looking at these vehicles and quickly realized that there's a number of constraints that are stopping the owner operators from just going to their dealers and buying these trucks. For one, it's no secret that some of these electric Class 8 trucks are almost 3 times that of a diesel truck. You couple that with unknown range, insurance, maintenance, and so forth, and there's plenty of reasons why these owner operators aren't just running to the dealers to buy them. And at Watt EV, we took this as a challenge to solve that. And one of our solutions is to offer a truck as a service, all inclusive of the vehicle, the range, the insurance, the maintenance, and so forth, all at a cost that's nearly at par with diesel. And so the question becomes, how are we able to do this? When you break down the economics of a diesel truck, you have different variables. You have the leasing of the truck, you have the insurance, the registration, and you have the fuel. In ours, those are basically the same. And the way that we're able to get cost parity is by increasing the miles driven of those vehicles. And then the question becomes, okay, how do you do that and still avoid having a 2 to 3 hour charge time. And the way we go about doing that is to really work closely with the shippers to predefine routes that we know work in the infrastructure ecosystem that we have, and to match those routes with drivers so that, for instance, if a driver goes from one location to another, he or she can go to one of the depots that's close by to drop off their truck that's now out of charge and pick up a fully charged truck to go about their next load and to make it back to their starting location. And that way we're able to remove that 2 to 3 hour charge time that currently exists in the vehicles. So really this becomes a scheduling and optimization problem on our behalf that we're actively working on to solve. And then as the technology improves and as MCS, which allows for faster charge times, develops, we can expand our network beyond the middle mile sector that we're focusing on and expand to long haul freight. The other side of things that we're working on is that once these vehicles go through their useful life, we're demonstrating that you can utilize these batteries as second life for storage purposes. And you can also utilize those vehicles in shorter range trips, such as the drainage industry, where there's about 60 miles driven per truck per day. So at the end, WattEV is really bridging the gap and making the infrastructure, public infrastructure, available to everybody, as well as to the truckers that don't necessarily have the capital or the resources available to them to go into the electric truck fleet operations. And to shippers, they can now brand themselves as sustainable companies because they're essentially offloading their routes to WattEV to give to the end users.
Yeah. Interesting. And those locations that you're targeting, Bakersfield, San Bernardino, and near the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, are not only major transit corridors, they're also major air pollution corridors. Stella, Grid Alternatives works with communities that have been disproportionately harmed by pollution from trucking and transport. And I'm wondering if you can help us understand how California's medium heavy duty EV charging policy and deployment might give these communities a central role in redressing these historic harms, and how they can be designed so that these communities can take a fair stake in the economic and employment opportunities that they'll open up.
Thank you for the question, Jeff, and thanks to Commissioner Monahan and Salim for being part of this panel. Really excited about this. So how do we ensure a central role and a fair stake in economic and employment opportunities for our most vulnerable communities? Well, we do this via a couple of different ways. So first, get people involved, established a community first advisory committee that consists of residents along the 710 corridor. We want truck drivers, students, other experts from government, nonprofits, academia, community-based organizations, especially, and other key stakeholders. And from this Community First Advisory Committee, we then develop an equity plan to make sure that they're represented, their ideas are heard and included in this whole strategy. We implement and document that community engagement. We make sure that we are soliciting feedback from these folks, from these advisory committees, and we evaluate opportunities for improvement. Make sure that, again, that they have the input and that we're integrating it into the project throughout the project. And then finally, we establish a workforce development advisory committee. And we want to make sure that we're working very closely with the community, but as well, clean tech, folks like Salim, high schools, colleges, the ports, workforce investment boards. We want to make sure that through this effort, that we're creating local jobs, we're creating community benefits, a clean economy, and we're building prosperity in these areas that have been impacted by local freight pollution. We want to make sure we're building that bridge into the community so they have a better understanding for this strategy. So it's all about getting people involved that are going to be most impacted. But I think, it's in the long run, it's going to be a positive effort. And, we hear all the time from these communities, which we've been working in for many years now, that we need to be involved. We need, you not to come in and make the decisions for us and tell us, for example, where charging stations are going to go, but, ask for our opinion. And so I think that's how we make sure that they have a central role, a fair stake in all of this.
I see. Interesting twist on the publicly available, I think, construct. I guess I should ask how the public availability of this charging infrastructure or refueling infrastructure is being prioritized and balanced against the potential conflicts that might emerge as individual fleet operators seek to ensure necessary access. I could see utilization rates from the charging or refueling infrastructure being a pressure to open it up. I could also see availability rates being an issue. And I'm curious how you go about balancing that or making plans that take that careful balance into account.
I'm assuming that's for me. Let me start. So, last year's budget gave us some pretty specific goals in terms of vehicle deployment and the infrastructure that we need for that. So 1,000 school buses, 1,000 transit buses, and 1,150 drayage trucks. And so each one of these is going to have, in terms of for school buses and transit buses, those tend to be private. And so I'm expecting most of those investments to be private, although, we found like in Alameda County that the transit district has a public access to their hydrogen station as well as private. So that, hopefully we can blend or, identify those opportunities and capitalize on them when we could get a win for the fleet and a win for the public as well. When it comes to, long haul vehicles, of course, those need to be public, right? We need to have a way along major transportation corridors to be able to refuel these vehicles. So we're looking both at the numbers of infrastructure that we need for both fuel cell and battery electric, medium and heavy duty trucks, and the location.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And I should say, can I say one last thing for drayage trucks? I mean, a lot of these are small owner operator. And so the model Watt EV could be really helpful here. But again, I think those are places where we really have to consider, is this a private or a public refueling option? And for owner operators, I'm assuming a lot of this has to be public, but that's to be tested.
Yeah, Salim, I don't know if you have any insights on that, how you guys are planning to see that scale up. And
sure. Yeah, great question. So, I mean, to start with, all of our stations are public. But when you look at, some of the private companies that have done proof of concepts with some of these electric trucks, they've all been return to base operations. And in order for you to go from where the state of technology is now to full scale electric transports using zero emission vehicles, there has to be public infrastructure. And for the vehicles that we purchased, there is the cost constraints in terms of how expensive the vehicles are. But in order to go from the middle mile sector to long haul, the technology really has to get to the point where you have MCS capability, which reduces your charge time from 2 to 3 hours down to 30 to 45 minutes. And because we strategically placed where our charging depots are located, we've really already identified routes that we know work with the constraints of the vehicles and know that there is demand with the local owner operators in the areas that can facilitate those roads. But to get to MCS charging, that'll allow us to really expand beyond the middle mile and go towards the long haul freight. And we are actively working on efforts to create a zero emissions corridor that goes all the way from Los Angeles to Sacramento as well.
Right. We only have about 30 seconds left, but Stella, I certainly wonder if you have any thoughts about how the communities along the I-710 or the 710 or throughout the state are looking at access as a key issue, whether for owner operators or for the community at large.
Yeah, Jeff, great question. We have been administrators for the Access Clean California program over the past several years. And so we're starting to see more folks interested in more consumers interested in electric cars. They're really excited about it. Obviously there's some roadblocks. There's the whole education piece that is critical to making folks more comfortable with the idea of driving an electric car, finding charging stations, being able to afford charging stations. And so there's that level of acceptance that continues to grow. And that's what I'm hoping that, these same residents and community members will start to see, that it just doesn't end with passenger vehicles. Now we're moving on to medium and heavy duty vehicles. And, we want them involved. We want to hear from them. And we know that we will be much more successful if they're engaged and they're not surprised by any of this. So I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you very much. I do believe we are out of time, but it's been a fascinating conversation, packed a lot into a short period of time. And Commissioner Monahan, Salim Yousafzadeh, and Stella Ursua, thanks again for helping us understand this complicated topic.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
thanks.
Yeah.